hear something from our great keynote speaker in retail, predicting the future of retail and really bringing experience of customers to the next level. So welcome, Daniel, and it would be great to hear more from you.
Yes, good morning, Niko. I'm delighted to be here. It's a sunny day in Belgrade. Very different from the first day I came here when it was about -10. But yes, as you say, retail has probably gone through a transformational year in these last 12 to 18 months, and one it probably will take a very long time to get over and probably never forget. But I think, as you rightly point out, it does sort of bode well for many of us, because many of these trends had been going on for some time, and I know we're going to talk about some of those trends in the coming in this coming session.
Yes. How did you get so much experience, with retail? I mean, your CV looks amazing, with all the big brands, that you had opportunity to work with.
Yes, I guess it's a really interesting journey when I look back on it. It certainly wasn't one that I planned, but it has taken me through a number of different arenas. I started actually really passionate about combining my leisure activity, which was computer gaming amongst many other things, but something I genuinely loved, with my professional activity, which was as an advertising media planner. And I put those two areas together and decided that I really needed to see advertising appear inside a video game. And I started to do that in 1990, and woe and behold, I found out I was the very first person to do that. Today, that's an industry worth many billions, tens of billions of dollars. In fact, games are actually conceived and developed because of their advertising content, because of their association with brands. It's hard to imagine that that actually started somewhere and that I was actually that person that started it. So it's a great pleasure. But it then took me on to video game development. And yes, over the sort of 15 or 16 years I was involved in that, the games that I made reached #1 positions. Motocross Mania, I think, being the biggest selling game. And we racked up probably upwards of 50 million game sales. If I was in the music business, I'd probably be well known, but in the games business in those days, nobody knows you. But that took me into the world of retail in around 2010, I guess, for an incredible company in the UK called ASOS, a company that had really forged much of what we know as sort of pure play online fast fashion, because they were very targeted at 20-somethings. And the founder was someone I had worked with many, many years previously. He knew my journey, and he asked me to help identify the future for ASOS. Where was it going? And I'll remember it sort of to the day I die, because he took out of his pocket in 2010 this thing called an iPhone. And that was only a few years old. And he said, I really believe this is transformative. He described it as the monster coming over the hill. And he said, this is one thing that's going to change everything we know. I want you to go and find the other things. So I then spent a number of years on planes, trains, and automobiles looking for the future of fashion tech, as I called it. What was technology going to do to the world of fashion? How was it going to change the shopper's experience and indeed every aspect of the retail value chain? And of course, I found quite a bit on my journey, and it was a huge educational experience for me as well. And I felt sort of obliged to sort of champion those voices, those early startup voices that I was seeing with their incredible innovative ideas. I wanted to sort of speak about them. I wanted to tell not just the people at ASOS about them, but others about them. So I used, I guess, the gift that I had to speak. And I started to talk about these movements, and it all sort of went from there.
So from the past we have Super Mario, and for the future we have Super Daniel.
You're very kind. You're very kind. But I do think there is a link between the two, because I think that retailers have for obviously many years used technology, but the technology and their attitude towards technology was driven largely by operational efficiency. And I guess with especially the iPhone and the move to sort of digital native Gen Zs and millennials, there was a demand for something else, and I sort of describe that as a desire for digital experience. And there's probably no better reference point for digital experience than a video game.
Yes.
It's an art form that actually is wholly dependent on the technology, but for which the technology, as far as the gamer is concerned, is absolutely useless and invisible. It doesn't matter. What matters is the experience. And I think retailers are now beginning to see that that's their next step. How can they iterate on their business models, which largely, if you go to most retailers' online store, is presented as much, as mostly a catalog. How can they move that forward to being an experience? And I think gaming does have, some clues.
Yeah, everybody's thinking of gaming just games, but yeah, it would be great to push all this to the big five animals that we have prepared for you, to go through. So what we're going to talk about is the Black Swan from Nassim Taleb, the big theory, not just anti-fragile, but how the trends are changing on the global level. We're going to move on the level of, there's a big sea, ocean, let's say, with a lot of sharks inside. So we're going to talk about sharks and in the ocean, finding the right niche on the markets, for the companies. We're going to move later for the unicorns and growth, what are the companies in speed that is right for them. After that, we will talk about purple cows, Seth Godin book, and theory that applied for products. And most important, I believe, at the end, Jacques Hadamard, the oldest theory from last century, let's say, and it's about butterfly wings and hurricanes that are happening on the other side, almost literally sometimes, but it's more about personal influence on all this. So if you open the trends, like we already touched the base with this, how do you see trends what's changing now with we mentioned COVID-19, there are other trends that's happening. How do you see these trends influencing the let's say the world itself, global trends?
Yeah. I think to answer that question, I'd sort of take a step back and say that we're in a region that actually about 100 years ago saw some major shifts, and a chap by the name of Lenin sort of made the comment that there are decades when nothing happens. And sometimes there are weeks when decades happen.
Yeah.
And I think that in the last year for retail, it's been that sort of case. We've seen weeks where literally decades have happened. I have been, treading my shoe leather for some years, calling upon retailers to start to digitize their business models, start to embrace the opportunities that are there for them, start to think beyond just operational efficiencies and towards how they're going to craft these essentially online digital experiences. And, yes, it was interesting to them, and some were already very heavily engaged in that. But for the vast majority, it was kind of something that they could file in, a tomorrow's task. I think that all changed in the last 18 months. I think what we saw was this realization that it is now absolutely urgent to make that sort of shift. And that urgency was sort of demonstrated very clearly in the haves and the have-nots. You could see in the likes of ASOS and Zalando and companies who had embraced a digital culture many, many years previously, that they actually thrived during those periods. ASOS's net profit results were incredible. They were up sort of like 30%, whereas companies like John Lewis, who were the sort of bastions, the establishment of, sort of the department store, if you like, in the shopping malls.
Sainsbury's, yeah.
They saw their footfall decimated. They found themselves kind of in really difficult times. And I think that aspect of, the shift had already happened, the cultural shift within those business had already happened for some, meant that they were sort of in a tremendously strong position to then take advantage of these incredibly difficult times. Yes, you touch on Sainsbury's. Obviously, grocery did, have a tremendously strong period. But it was, I think it's really interesting to see overall the difference between those that had sort of taken this, grasped this nettle many years previously, and those who had become laggards. And I guess what the laggards realized over the last months is that there is actually no going back. If I may, the new experience of many shoppers who had historically sort of shunned digital technologies, that they'd learnt a new way of being. They'd sort of seen that actually online wasn't that difficult, was actually quite convenient. And in fact, they had no choice because they couldn't go to the stores anymore. And those habits will last, for quite some time.
Yeah. So we have choice between shift happens and shit happens, for in a way, for laggards. Yeah,
yeah, maybe, yes.
We'll see. So good. These trends, are really influencing many things, And if we focus just on the market, for example, of retail as your core specialty in a way, where of course there are customers there are many customers in retail in many ways, but it's really a huge market. There's so many industries inside the retail also, that we can talk. One side, the B2B from supply chain, warehousing, logistics, payments, and things, but also industries. We can talk about luxury, cosmetics, many other, automobile, cars and things. Where do you see, for example, the niche? Where would be the niches in retail industry, that are important to find for retailers, let's say?
Well, look, we've been on that journey for some time. We were introduced to the concept of the everything store, by Jeff Bezos and Amazon, at the turn of the millennium. And, we have seen that go on to become a juggernaut in terms of retail, and to do some incredible things, in terms of perhaps its ability to cross different spheres from
so innocent, from books in a way.
From books to retail, to everything, and what that did, I firmly believe, for retail was it ushered in a new age. When we were kids, if we wanted to buy something, we went to the store, we were presented with an array of products on a shelf. And if the product wasn't on the shelf, the product was not available. It didn't exist to us. That's not today's world. Today's world is a world of unlimited products, unlimited supply. Yeah. So whilst we lived in a world of restricted supply where there were gatekeepers, today's shopper has access to everything literally at the click of a button. And that unlimited supply has given rise to essentially, untold niches, as you rightly point out. And those niches really have within them their own communities, because now you're able to express yourself through those niches. And so the retailer's position has actually changed quite dramatically from being sort of top down to preach from on high of what they have in their store, to actually being horizontal to want to be part of those communities, to want to participate, if you like. And you can see the rise of that through their involvement with social media, for example, and how they are participating, thinking about the use of influencers and sort of becoming aligned with influencers, because that can actually give them a credible voice within those communities. Yeah. One of the trends I think that's really particularly interesting in the coming years is going to be the move from influencers to micro-influencers. Yes. Okay. And each and every one of us is a micro-influencer. Within our networks, within our social sort of fabric of our lives, if you like, we all know that friend or person who is an expert on something, the person we would go to, whether it be for fashion advice or what car should I buy or who's the guy that knows about tech. There's or girl, I should say. Yeah. I mean, use that, in both senses. But there's always someone within our grouping that is for us our influencer. And so, how brands are going to connect with those micro influencers is really, really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. So, moving from the big guys from Kardashians and Ronaldo in a way with hundreds of millions of followers, they still earn well, moving to kind of the community, who is our tribe, let's say, who do I trust around me, we trust our family, we trust our friends, and with the socializing online during the COVID-19, we get even closer to our virtual friends.
Exactly, because ultimately it is the sort of social proof that we need when we want to go and buy something. Yeah, it's highly, highly influential. of course, it's all, all myriad of challenges involved with that because, how do you do that at scale, for example?
Yeah.
The early days for retailers working with influencers was incredibly manual, very sort of finger in the air, hard for them to judge. They kind of knew they had to do it, but they didn't really know what it gave them. And obviously, influencer costs went up and up and up, and they sort of scrambled to sort of try to find out, what are the metrics that we need to judge this campaign upon. They're going to have that challenge and some when it comes to, the idea of micro-influencers.
Yeah. On this FastForward podcast, we're discussing a lot with unicorns in a way, and I'm amazed by the number of unicorns happening lately. Moving from 2004 when the first one company was called unicorn in a way, and it was like statistical mistake for economists, moving up to 800 companies already in the last month, for example, 801 called unicorn, like $1 billion, and they're growing so fast. There's so much money behind pushing, let's say, the growth and speed of growth of unicorns becoming decacorns, and we have even bigger companies than decacorns today. How do you see in companies when we talk? What's your experience with companies and speed that is shifting with these trends and on these markets that we are discussing? Yeah.
Well, that's a big question. I've been passionate about early stage companies for much of my career. I've trodden that particular journey, that walk, yes, let's say, for many years. I know the challenges involved, the pain, the glory, everything in between. And I've also seen, the large corporates as they grapple with, the risks of being an incumbent and the desire to innovate as, younger, more nimble startups pop up all around them and sort of take nibbles, of the pie that they once controlled. And it's not easy for them. I think we touched on it at the start. From the larger corporate perspective, I really think probably one of the most fundamental pieces in their ability to make this transition is culture. And that, of course, is heavily influenced by what's going on at the top. Mm-hmm. It's still the case within retail, maybe less today, but the guys who are at the top, have been around for a very long time. Maybe a lot of what's happening in technology shifts and the sort of, especially new generations, digital natives that we talked about, is a little hard for them to sort of grasp. I'm a bit of an anomaly amongst my peer group in terms of my appreciation. I almost feel that the saying that to be a millennial is a state of mind, not an age, is certainly true for me, but not so true for many of my peers as I look around. And so I do understand that it's hard for them to grasp these kind of changes. And some of the markets don't really encourage that. They focus on the latest quarterly results. So, sort of long-term innovation, as you well know, which is iterative, which is, takes time, which is full of mistakes and pitfalls and pivots, is heavily punished by the markets when it comes to the share price, which, of course, the CEO is rewarded by. So, combine all of those things. There's a structural problem within innovation, especially within Europe. Within the US, it's slightly different. We know that. And, that's a sort of different case over there. But certainly within Europe, we've grappled with how do we make those changes. And of course, again, COVID sort of swept away some of those problems because it was now do or die, and as simple as that.
Yeah. And you're also now in the story of HTEC. We're experiencing, let's say, growth from 200 to 1,000, from last year to this year, 1,000 people on board. So how do you see this let's say, speed influencing in the company growth, also influencing the changes that are happening in?
Well, yes, it's a fabulous question, and I have. I first scouted HTEC, if you like, in 2014 during those days with ASOS. I was, as I said, I was in Belgrade one day. It felt like this place far away. It was freezing cold, and where the hell was I? And I followed that journey at the time. I think there were sort of 40 or 50 people. When I decided that I wanted to eat my own dog food. I was becoming successful as a speaker. I was heavily involved in sort of working with large corporates and many retailers, across the globe. And I wanted to actually be a maker, not just a talker.
Yeah.
But I needed a really stellar team to be able to grapple with some of the thinking that we were going to be bringing to the table. These difficult challenges, the challenge of robotics, the challenge of automation, the challenge of a single stock view, which is like a nirvana for many retailers today. The challenge of crafting digital experiences that moved us away from that catalog approach that I talked about earlier. I needed some rock stars. And I knew what a rock star looked like because I'd spent years making games, and I had employed hundreds of rock stars, amongst many hundreds who really weren't. So I kind of knew the DNA a little bit, and I saw that in HTEC. And so it's not really a surprise to me that they've gone on from strength to strength, because they had all the right ingredients, plus they had that culture that I talked about. They were run by two young founders who cared deeply about their people, who cared deeply about doing the right thing, about being a good citizen, if you like. That it wasn't just about the business, it wasn't just about the money. So, they introduced this idea of a bench, for example, where people within their employ could go when they weren't necessarily working on the right project to reskill, retool, to learn some new things, and ultimately actually to spin off some new ideas that HTEC then brought to the market, such as the HUMED's ECG heart tracker, which is, has the capability of saving millions of lives. And all of that came from this culture of sort of, we're in it together, we're a team. Now, obviously, as you grow from 200 to then 1,000, that becomes another challenge, right, to sustain that. And I think that that the company is certainly going through some of that. But I would say that with that strong cultural leadership, I've every confidence in the success, and it remains the case that that HTEC is almost crafting a new path for what previously was understood as being an outsourcer. The outsourcing companies, the giants that we know in the market, have sort of become dinosaurs because they're so big that it's almost, when you go and work with them, I almost feel it's like, hiring a taxi driver.
Yes.
For as long as you sit in the taxi and pay, they'll drive you around. But as soon as you get out the taxi, they'll go and pick somebody else up. What does that mean in technology? It means that you're probably going to end up with a whole host of technical debt that you're not going to discover for some time until later. Where HTEC is different, I believe, is that it actually assumes that responsibility from start to end. It's there with you in the trenches, and it's there ready to pick up the problems when they emerge, which of course they must emerge, because technology is not a linear path, and those that think it is, those that still believe it's a waterfall, are really having tremendous difficulty.
I agree. And when we look at this growth, I mean, in the company, like you mentioned, I mean, really people are making the difference, and people are making also relationship. When you compare the taxi comparison in a way, so HTEC is bringing much more personal, let's say, relationship also with the clients. I mean, when you build partners, you build for long term, like in personal life. I mean, it's what you want to build and grow together, and then you can also put yourself much more in the shoes of partner in a way, with the process of learning about each other, and you can predict much better, in which direction, how they act, like married couples. Sometimes even without saying, what other people will do or how they react on some of the things.
Yep. I mean, many of the clients that I work with, are very keen to, have access to people that can tell them how does somebody else do it, because obviously they're conscious that accessing, sort of high caliber, often very specialist engineering resources is very difficult for them. Best will in the world, if you're a rock star coder, you probably don't want to go and work for a retailer. You probably want to go and set up your own startup, because those opportunities there are a myriad of them today. And if you don't want to do that, you might want to go and work for a global titan like Facebook or Google or someone of that ilk. Retailing is probably quite far down the line. So they're finding quite a lot of churn in their engineering resources, which of course, combining that with the old style of outsourcing is creating headache. It's creating difficulty because, and I saw this for the very first time back in the games business with a little company at the time called Take-Two, who brought out a game called Grand Theft Auto. And it was an okay game. I mean, it was pretty impressive. People liked it, and it was reasonably successful, but not much more. And then they brought out the second version of Grand Theft Auto, and it was a little bit better. But what had happened in the interim was that 2D had been replaced by 3D. So we were starting to see 3D, far more photorealistic games appearing. And this game sort of showed some promise. And then we saw Grand Theft Auto 3. And Grand Theft Auto 3 turned Take-Two into $1 billion publisher within a matter of weeks. It had reached a level of sophistication because it had gone through version 1, version 2, and then it was on to version 3. By that stage, it was incredible. And of course, it has gone on to be one of the leading brands in the video game business for over a decade, well over a decade. So my point with that story is to sort of suggest that there is no short path. There is no sort of shortcut you can take. You do need to go through these painful sort of stages of iterating upon whatever it is you want to do. And often within large corporates, there has been a culture of, mistakes are bad. If you make a mistake, you get punished. If you make a mistake, your job is at risk. We essentially make our people fearful at a time when we need to make them explorers. We need them to be prepared to take on challenges without fear, without risk of sort of, instant sacking or the like. And that's never more true than in technology, because if that culture had existed, Take-Two would never had received, the success that they got with GTA 3.
Yeah, you actually brought me interesting comparison in a way, in a speed of growth of companies and product development in a way. So also with having 200 people or 1,000, you're changing the dimensions in a way, from 2D to 3D in a different form, let's say, with management, with structure, with office space, whatever it's needed to build up the strong pillars for let's say future skyscraper, to have enough floors for the growth.
Yes, and you can lose that DNA that got you there in the first place if you're not careful. I mean, I think that HTEC, as I said earlier, will overcome that challenge just as many corporates have to overcome that challenge as they scale. But I'm confident it will, because of that cultural leadership that is so clearly ingrained in the company, and I see it. But you're right, you're absolutely right that it is one of the big challenges to any business as they grow and as they scale and as they succeed. And you need to allow your people to make mistakes and be of the mantra that that it's by making those mistakes that we will succeed. Actually, mistakes are good. In fact, when you need to worry is when there are no mistakes.
Yes. That's true. And here we move to the fourth animal already, with the purple cow, with the product. I mean, HTEC is a service company in a way, but if you look at the field of, let's say, retail, and if you expand this field, what do you see HTEC is doing different? What are the, what you can offer to the retailers or to companies working in this, let's say, quite wide field?
Yes. Yes, retail is obviously vast, and, it's many different sort of subsections within it, as you mentioned at the start. So I think that our opportunities to help retailers really sort of revolve around a couple of sort of key points. I think the first one is that we're able to take on really tough challenges. So where there isn't necessarily that specific skill set within the retail technology team, where they are struggling, where perhaps they don't have access to. And I mean, one of those examples has been in the area of robotics, which of course is kind of closely associated with the area of IoT, which both of which are beginning to sort of find their way into the narrative of what does the future store that I go shop in actually look like? You know, do I now go into a store and I don't queue up behind a till anymore? Because that's what we've done for 100 years.
Yes.
I mean, I urge you to look at the early photos of a storekeeper from, say, in the 1920s and a storekeeper from the 2020s.
Yeah.
They're still standing in the same place, behind a desk, behind a till, sort of with a barrier between them and the customer queuing up. You know, well, that already is a problem because customers do not, you know, need to be socially distanced, so therefore they don't really want to stand in a queue. Equally, cash has taken a huge hit within, you know, we were already on a journey towards the death of cash before COVID, but I can't remember the last time I paid for anything with cash. So that journey has accelerated out of all proportion. So now customers are looking for experiences within stores that maybe just involve the idea of scan, pay, leave. So I think that you know, we as HTEC, if you like, bring one of the areas that's truly important in terms of what we bring to the table is that ability to embark on the toughest of challenges.
Okay.
I think the other area that we bring to the table, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier about the fact that, you know, we are in the trenches. You know, we're not the taxi driver, if you like. We're the chauffeur. So we're going to be around whenever you need us. You know, we're not just going to run for the hills as soon as we receive a paycheck. You know, we're in it for keeps, as it were. And I think that our ability to bring creative thinking to many of these deeply difficult, transformative areas is highly valued by our clients. You know, that we have on our walls that we are where creativity meets deep engineering. And there is a genuine interaction between those two. You know, I was fortunate enough to spend many years working with creative teams building incredible games. They were as much about technology and code and the ability to manage polygons and the like as they were about design and art and, you know, just the experience that you were going to present, because it was about the suspension of disbelief ultimately. And I think retail is similarly the suspension of disbelief in many categories, most notably fashion. So I think that we bring, you know, a combination of tackling the really toughest of challenges, the ability to stay for the whole game, not just kind of, you know, look for the earliest exit door, and also that creative technology mashup, if you like, that is so vital in as we forge new frontiers. So
top three, and as the fourth super force, let's say, bringing your experience and gamification and many other things that you already experienced with other fast-growing companies that can bring really added value to many of the retailers, let's say, in the
yes,
industry.
It's a difficult, you know, they're in a difficult spot, many of them right now, and they need, you know, people they can rely on, and people that will deliver, and people that will, you know, kind of help them to inspire their shoppers, their colleagues, you know, their business. You know, they're looking at new business models, many of them, you know, as the sort of fundamental role of the store changes, in some respects diminishes, because as we look at the rise of e-commerce over this period, you know, it has gone from, you know, in some cases as an average, I think it's gone to around about 40% now of all sales. It was before the pandemic, as an average globally, around 10. So, you know, I'm talking all sectors here. Obviously, you take certain sectors, you know, that they're higher and others are lower, but you know, that's a seismic difference to go from 10 to 40 in a matter of 18 months. You know, so there is clearly, you know, sort of a challenge to, we need to do this fast. What we need to do is hard, and we haven't got the people or the talent or the capacity to do it. And everybody's doing that at the same time. So I think that
Big challenge.
HTEC I think HTEC can be of tremendous importance in that. And some of those skill sets I talked about earlier become absolutely crucial.
Because today, I mean, it used to be that we want to do everything inside. In a way, we know best. You know, we have experience, we have customers, and things. And if you really want to shift the game, you know, if you want, it used to be okay. I'm going to look for consultants. I'm going to look for something. And today, with this speed of change that's happening last 18 months, let's say, it's not even enough to look just outside for advice. You know, you have to get all the possible resources because all the best people are already busy.
Well, indeed. You know, you're right that for a very, very long time, funnily enough, those laggards that I spoke about at the beginning were the most likely to have the opinion that we do everything in-house. It was often from those sort of
cheaper. It's ours. We know best.
We know best kind of mentality, exactly. But of course, when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, and everybody was forced to work from home, suddenly everybody was in a distributed model.
Yeah,
and in the early stages of that, businesses were quite fearful that productivity would decline because, you know, people are sitting at home. I've got no way of managing them. I don't know what they're doing. So, you know, will they do anything or they just watch TV? Actually, productivity went up in terms of engineering specifically, and probably many other areas, but I was particularly interested in the technology piece. You know, engineers, when entrusted, when working from, they didn't mind where they sat. They were almost happier to work from home because now they didn't have to waste 2 hours a day on traveling into town. They didn't have to waste loads of money on, you know, on tube fares, buying their lunch, you know, and all the incidentals. And they were able to focus, and the productivity actually went up. So retailers actually sort of saw that distributed models is actually a positive, a net positive on their business. And so that encouraged them to sort of really question this idea of, do we need an expensive office in the center of town where we host all of these hundreds of people who are actually less productive than when they're sitting at home? Or should we move to a different model? And of course, they still, you know, heavily focus on their core, but what they also look for now is help around the periphery. And that, you know, is using the experience of this distributed model that they gained during COVID.
Yeah. It's a big shift, let's say, happening in this period of time. We will see how what next year brings.
I think it's exciting, Niko. I mean, I think that, you know, I've said for probably since 2016. I mean, one phrase I put out there for a fashion you know, retail audience was, you know, was the future of fashion couture or code? And it was sort of hit some waves about, oh wow, this is kind of an interesting idea. Is it all about the fashion, or is it going to be about the code and how we deliver it? And I think that question is still pretty ripe. Another area that I also sort of teased them a little bit with, I suppose, was the fact that we are moving towards a golden age of retail. And I genuinely believe we are. And you made that comment at the start. I think that, you know, our ability to shop anywhere at any time, anything, it's magical. And I think that as retailers now master that art form and become the storytellers that they've always been, because retail is theatre. You know, it's shopping is a leisure activity as much as we don't buy clothes because we need them. We buy them because of, you know, how it makes us feel. And I think that retailers now need to become interactive storytellers. And that's going to be a pretty exciting place for us all.
That's bringing us to the last animal that we have on stock, you know, the butterfly and butterfly wings. So it's more about personal, about your experience, about people that are in the game that we already touched at the beginning and in between. So when you think of this, so what was your biggest challenge, for example, so far that you've seen in your, how did you handle it? I mean, it's like quite many experiences that you already experienced it as, but if you have to pick maybe one of those, what would you take?
Yeah, I think it came pretty early on, actually.
Okay.
It was, as I said, I became somewhat passionate about, sort of seeing gaming become a channel for advertising. And I wanted to make that happen at a time when it was considered to be a toy. So it was 6-7 years before Google. I had created something called a digital advertising agency. Nobody knew what a digital advertising agency was. They didn't even know what digital was. I'd seen many of them. And I would go to advertisers and advertising agencies and say, there is this channel. It's called gaming. It's very popular with, well, it was young boys at the time.
Yes.
And you can reach them. This is the way to do it. It was incredibly difficult, and it was incredibly, and I was incredibly poor, so I didn't have much money to sort of do the 18 months that it was going to take me to sort of survive to get the first client. The first client actually was Coca-Cola. And
Amazing.
The very first game was the Barcelona Olympic video game that appeared on the Sega console at the time. And if you find it, there's a little Coke banner that sort of, flies across the top of the stadium, because the Olympic Committee doesn't allow advertising inside the stadium.
Yes.
So we had to find ways of incorporating this Coke message within the game. The difficulty was really one of, the sort of belief that I could get there, the knowledge that I had what it took to make this happen, and all the factors around me that were conspiring to sort of say, no, you can't. And to actually be able to battle through that, to have the perseverance to actually get through that when the road ahead of me was so uncertain. And that was a life lesson, which I think has I've carried on, however hard it seems, however difficult the challenge before you, just keep going, because there is the sun just coming up on the horizon.
Oh, that's put so nicely, together. And probably you needed some kind of superpowers, let's say, to go through your challenges, the first one and the later ones coming, What keeps you, going through the toughest days? So how do you see your...
Well, I love what I do, and I'm a father now of 2 grown-up kids, and who are taking their first steps into the world of work. And I've been at pains to sort of encourage them to pursue their careers in areas that interest them, that they enjoy, that they that life is too short to do something you don't like. That there are many things that you can do. In a big chunk of my career, I've created my own job. They didn't exist. There was no job for selling advertising on video games in 1990. I made it happen. There was no job for speaking about the future of fashion tech.
Yes.
I made it happen. You can create your own destiny. And I think you create your own destiny when you do something that gives you pleasure. Because we spend so many hours, at work, that really we need to be doing something that we enjoy doing, because it's only if we enjoy it that we'll actually be good at it, funnily enough. If we really hate something or we're not enjoying it, it's probably already clear that we're not going to succeed at that. So stop. Go and do something that you do like, because there's plenty of choice in today's world. And if you can't find something that you like, invent it. Because there's that opportunity as well, and that's been the rise of the tech entrepreneur.
Yep, that's how most of the startups start, from the passion, and goes trying to keep the passion as long as possible, with having to juggle between accounting and sales and marketing and so many things. And
take that reference of the Take-Two GTA story.
Yeah.
The first one was okay. The third one, they were $1 billion publisher literally overnight. Realize that it's the journey, as much as the destination, and that you might end up on your journey in a destination that was completely different to the one you thought you were going to reach at the beginning, and that's okay, because it is the journey that gives us the pleasure.
So we can say even that since you're coming from the gaming industry in a way, each one of us is having our own game. We're living in our own game,
Yeah.
leveling up,
Yeah.
if possible,
Yeah.
and having a joystick of our lives, to manage our superpowers, do we get more lives, and do we get more opportunities, let's say.
It's a nice way of putting it, Niko.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah. What is keeping you so? You have so much energy, talking about these things. You're really passionate about. What is inspiring you? What do you, suggest? Read, watch, or maybe listen. That keeps you, inspired as you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inspired by it because I do see a brighter future. I guess I saw a glimpse of, how this digital experience that I spoke about earlier, really can take what was a cottage industry into, the largest medium on the planet, the one that dominates all others.
Yes.
It's gaming is now, bigger than movies and radio and TV combined.
Wow.
I can remember the times when music publishers wouldn't even speak to us. They thought
Yes.
we were sort of like,
Kids,
noisy
yeah.
kids
Yeah.
kind of thing. No, you can't have access to our music. Who the hell are you? Today, they're queuing up down the street to be on the next version of FIFA.
Yeah.
Because it's a channel. So, I think that what gives me that drive, if you like, in retail is the promise of a better future. Almost the frustration of being a shopper as well. I'm probably one of the worst people ever to go shopping with because I spot all the things that I want to change. I spot all the things that I want to make better. And they upset me in a sense. And I sort of channel that energy rather than to the negative of, oh, it's upset me. I channel it to the positive of, well, how can that be better? Why should that be better? Can I make that better? So it's a great feeling of empowerment, I think, if you take those things that you see around you, those pain points, and if you speak to any successful startup entrepreneur, what they've done so well is they've found one of those pain points and they've made it better. And if you can do that, and everyone can do that, quite honestly, that's not a superpower that's unique to me. We all have that ability. It's going to give you a huge amount of pleasure. It's going to give you a huge amount of energy. You are going to become passionate about it. You are going to start to speak about it. Maybe bore everyone around you about it, but it's going to be something that helps you find your voice. And I think everyone has that voice. And there's no greater pleasure in life than to be able to find it. So, I think it's that, really, fundamentally, in terms of my work.
We're talking about pleasure. Do you still have pleasure going to the old shopping, or everything is online?
No, I really do both because, of course, and I really like the intersection of both as well. What retailers refer to as omni-channel.
Yes.
Which I actually don't refer to as omnichannel. I actually refer to it as responsive retail. I actually want these various channels that we can use. We can start social, we can start on web, we can start in store, we can take any number of journeys through all the different myriad permutations that we have. I think there's something like 150 different permutations from start to finish. I really like how they can inform, inspire, and change each other. So what we do, online now informs and changes the experience we're going to have in the store, and vice versa. Now we're not there yet. We're miles away from there, but I see that as being a near-term sort of possibility for retail, where that kind of responsive piece is where we go to next with this idea of omnichannel. So. I like to check out those, kind of where we are, where various retailers are in that. And I'm often disappointed, but that's okay because, as I said earlier, I channel that energy into being creative about fixing it rather than, it just doesn't work. And, I think that, as I said earlier, that can bring you a great deal of pleasure.
Thank you for your response. It's really amazing to talk about the future of retail. And I believe we'll together build a new golden era that is moving really fast forward together with us. And thank you for all the podcasters for listening.
Thank you.